Good evening, everyone. I'm a little bit early tonight, but I am your host, Dr. DeAndrea Matthews, Senior Pastor of Visions International Ministry. I am coming on a little bit early tonight because I'd rather be early than late. And for those of you who know, you know all of the challenges that I have been facing this year. I am the caregiver for my mother, as well as the emergency contact for my father. So my life is quite busy, to say the least. So I wanted to come on a few minutes early tonight. And if it's all right with everyone here, whether you're watching live or via the replay, we're going to talk about something very practical this evening. And I know a lot of times when it comes to the Bible, we don't always look at it as far as the practical application, but that's what my focus is on this evening. And as a result of taking care of my parents, which is an honor, of course, to be able to be in a position to do that. While I am looking at that and thinking about all of the implications, one of the things that comes across is the fact that because of their health condition and because of the status that they're in right now, there are a lot of questions that I can no longer ask them and get answers to. So, tonight, for lack of a better term, the topic that we're going to deal with is really, where are you from and who are you with? Now, y'all know I got to say it like I want to say it. Where you from and who you with? That is our focus on this evening. So we're going to look at a very practical application of the word on tonight, and we are going to be in First Chronicles chapter 4, verses 32 through 38. Now, I'm actually going to read from the King James Version, which is something that I rarely do, but we're going to read from the King James Version this evening as we look at First Chronicles. And for those of you who've been with me for a amount of time, you know I like giving a little bit of backdrop or a background. And tonight is no different, because when you look at the book of First Chronicles, which is in the Old Testament, Chronicles really tells the religious history of God's people, whereas Kings tells the political history of God's people. So if you've ever read First and Second Kings, or if you ever read First and Second Chronicles, you might see a lot of the same stories being told, but it's from a different perspective. I want you to keep that in mind as we go through the lesson this evening, because that's going to be one of the points that I want to drive home, and I'll come back to as a takeaway as we look at the main focus for tonight. So, looking at First Chronicles chapter 4, verses 32 and 38. Hello, Mother Beverly. Anyone else who's joining, make sure that you say hello in the comments. And if you're watching on the replay, make sure you drop in hashtag replay. Hashtag replay. All right, First Chronicles chapter 4, verse 32. It says, "And their villages were Edom and Ain, Rimmon and Tochin, and Ashan, 5 cities, and all their villages that were round about the same cities unto Baal. These were their habitations and their genealogy. And Meshabab and Jamlech and Jasha, and the son of Amaziah, and Joel and Jehu, the son of Joshabiah, the son of Sariah, the son of Ashiel, and Elionai, and Jecobah, and Jeshoiah, and Asaiah, and Adiel, and Jesimiel, and Benaniah, and Ziza, the son of Shiphi, the son of Elon, the son of Jediah, the son of Shimri, the son of Shemaiah. These, mentioned by their names, were princes in their families, and the house of their fathers increased greatly." So that was First Chronicles chapter 4, verses 32 through 38. And again, I'm focusing on this particular scripture for several reasons. The first reason is tonight's Bible study is going to be very practical. And you're probably saying, well, all those names, how's it going to be practical? We're going to get there in a minute. Stick with me. So, practical application of the word on tonight. The first thing we look at is verse 32, and it starts out telling what their villages were. So when we look at the question, where are you from? Where are you from? Where is your family from? Where are your people from? You know, back down south, you know, when you introduce somebody, one of the first things they would ask you is, who your people? And I know that's grammatically incorrect, but that's how they would say it. Who your people? You know, who you kin to. They want to know who you're connected to. So as we look at a practical application of the word on tonight, The lesson that I want to drive home, and again, I started by talking about my mom and dad. And again, a lot of family members have been working through genealogy. And again, with the 1619 project and other projects going on throughout the world, many people are trying to find their roots. They're trying to find who else they are connected to in their family. They're even finding people around the country that they did not know they were related to, that they're now connecting with via social media and other things. Hello, Charlotte. Good evening. So tonight's lesson really is to record and to document your family's information while you still can. And I say that because I'm no longer able to ask my mom or dad for information to be able to record things accurately. All of my grandparents are now deceased, so I don't have that information readily available to me. Now, a lot of things I've been told over the years, and some of it I can capture, but the older we get, the more details we forget. So while you still are able to, it's important for you to document your family lineage, to document your genealogy, to document where you're from and who your people are. So verse 32 in First Chronicles chapter 4 lets us know where they were from. It gives 5 particular cities. And again, I'm using this as a very practical example. Verses 34 through 37 gives the name of, again, the princes of their family. But again, these are the people that they can trace their lineage back to. It's important not only to document who those people are, but also it talks about them being princes. So it also talks about, again, the positions that they held, positions of authority within their communities, positions of authority within the cities and the villages where they lived. All of these details are important. So sometimes we tend to just say, okay, my mama's name was, my daddy's name was, and we don't even include information like birth dates, death dates, what they died from, who they were married to, or any of that information. But it's important to be able to document it in the same way that the Bible gives us examples. See, the Bible can be used in a lot of different ways, and today it's very practical, documenting your family lineage, documenting your family history. And the goal, I would think, would be to try and document at least 7 generations. Now, I'm not going to tell you to do something that I'm not going to do myself. So, even if I just look at myself, my kids, and my grandkids, that's 3 generations right there. A lot of people, please forgive me, but when I was teaching first grade, I remember this incident where a cousin that was in the same school came to pick up their little cousin, and she comes to the door of my first grade classroom and she said, "I'm here to pick up Man Man." And I'm like, "I don't know Man Man. What's Man Man's name?" "I don't know. We just call him Man Man." Please document folks' government names. So if we have to look them up in the census records or, birth certificate, death certificate, or anything else, we know their actual names. It's nice to put down their nicknames, and that's a good record to have, but we need to know their actual name. So please put down actual names. So I wanted to let you know that, again, Chronicles documents the religious history of Israel. Kings documents the political history of Israel. And I say it just as Kings and Chronicles because in the original text, it wasn't separated into 2 separate books. It wasn't First and Second Kings. It wasn't First and Second Chronicles. It was one book. It was Chronicles and Kings. In the later translations is when it was changed. And I believe it was Latin Vulgate. It's when it was changed into First and Second Kings and First and Second Chronicles. That's another story for another day. But again, documenting the history from a different perspective. Yes, 7 generations. It's 3 just looking at myself, my kids, my grandkids, but we should be able to go back to not just ourselves, but if we have siblings, documenting their information, documenting our parents and their siblings, documenting their parents who would be our grandparents and their siblings. And if you know it, the great grandparents and their siblings. All of that's information that hopefully has been shared with you, but if not, go back as far as you can. And again, the things that you don't know, if you have your parents' information, if you have siblings' information, you may be able to look up census records. Let me just drop this little gem. In 2022, which is next year, we will be able to get census information from the 1950s. So you only can get census information from after 75 years have expired, kind of like a copyright. You get that census information after 75 years have expired. So in 2022, we're able to get census records from the 1950s. Right now, it's only available from the 1940s on back. But again, that's valuable information if you want to be able to look up your family and be able to have some type of documentation as to who those people were. So again, not only do we want to document the cities, what cities did they live in? What cities did they come from? Were they a part of the Great Migration if they came from south and came up north? What cities did they come from? What cities did they go to? All of those things are important as you're documenting the history. And I want to say this as well. What perspective will you share? I talked about Chronicles being the religious history and Kings being the political history, because depending on the perspective that you want to write it down and jot it down from, that is what it will be recorded as. So just as Chronicles documents the religious history and talks about, again, the belief system, the values, the quote unquote, what we would call church now, Kings looks at it from political history. That means it's recording who was in power, the type of people who were advisors to the king and things of that nature, who they fought against. Those types of things are recorded as a part of the political history. So what perspective will you share? I'll give you another example of this, because in the book of Matthew and also in the book of Luke, we have the genealogy of Jesus. And a lot of times when we're looking at the genealogy of Jesus, we're looking at it from a particular perspective, but let's look at it from a very practical perspective, because we know there are a lot of blended families, particularly nowadays. Guess what? It didn't just start. So if we look at the genealogy, even of Jesus, in the book of Matthew, the genealogy starts with Abraham. Why does it start with Abraham? Because Abraham was the one that God made the covenant with. So as you look at the genealogy of Jesus, it's based on covenant relationship. And that's why it says, you know, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, those were the ones he had a covenant with. Everyone else that's listed are the ones who maintain the covenant. How do I know that? Because there are three kings that are omitted from that list. These were three evil kings, and they are not on that list. They were kings. You'd think they'd be on there, but no, they were evil kings, and they did not honor the covenant. God's a covenant keeping God. They did not honor the covenant that God had in place for the people, and they are not on that list. The list, or the genealogy in Matthew, lists three sets of 14 generations. That's very intentional. Again, there's reasons why it was recorded that way in the Bible, but what can we learn from that as far as our own families? What do you want recorded? The other thing that you probably should know about the genealogy in the book of Matthew, and for those of you who want to read it, it's Matthew chapter 1, verses 1 through 17. The other thing to know about the genealogy of Jesus in Matthew is that is the natural genealogy. Natural genealogy, another way to say that, could be what we would look at as more of a biological, or what would be considered the natural progression of things. If we look at in the book of Luke, it is more of a legal description, or by the law. One is by nature, one is by the law. What do I mean by that? If you compare the two genealogies, there are some specific differences in them. And the differences are related to, well, let's see, after David is where the genealogies really differ. And one description of why that is because you have one lineage of Joseph on the one side in the book of Matthew, and that would be based on one thing, again, nature. I'll get to that in a minute and what that means. And the other one, the genealogy in Luke, actually starts from Joseph and goes all the way back to Adam. Well, as you look at the person right before Joseph, it differs on the two lists. You might be wondering why. Did Joseph's daddy have a nickname? Did Joseph's daddy have a couple different names? No, that's not the case. And if you look and you dig deeper into it, you will find out that one brother died. And if you understood the law back then, if there was a widow of the husband and they did not have any children, then the brother was supposed to marry that widow and produce an heir. And that is what happened in the case of Joseph, which is why you have one who is the natural father and one who is the legal father. I won't get into a lot of details about that, but if you look at blended families, you need to be able to know how to document things. You need to be able to know that, okay, yep, this is the biological father, but this is the one who raised them. Or if you have adopted families, or you have foster families and other things, how do we document that? That goes back to what perspective you will share. And now we all probably got somebody in our family that wants to tell the story, but is that the story you want told? So don't rely on somebody else to tell your story. Document your family history the way you want it to be told. If you're telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, then put it all down there. It doesn't matter. For example, I've been married 3 times. That's not something that I advertise or broadcast, but it's the truth anyhow. So, if I need to be able to say, okay, these kids' father is my first husband, and these kids' father is my second husband, and these are my bonus children with my third husband, then that's just how it is. I can't go back and, take a eraser and erase my life of the way it was, but we do need to be able to record things accurately. So 5 generations from now, when I'm dead and gone, people will know exactly how they got to be cousins. They will know exactly how they got to be brother, sister, uncle, auntie, whatever, and they will understand things. I'll tell you something else, because I had something very embarrassing happened to me earlier today, and I can't believe I'm sharing all of this, but we're talking about family. So I had a cousin call me to get an update on my father's health. Now, mind you, there are a lot of people with this one particular name that I'll tell you in a minute in my family. And when he said his name on the message, because I was in a meeting when he called and I had to return the call, when he said, "This is your cousin blank," I'm like, oh, okay. I thought it was my little cousin, but it wasn't my little cousin, because again, it's a whole lot of people with the same name in my family. It wasn't my little cousin, it was my older cousin. So anyway, I embarrassed myself because I thought it was one person, it was somebody else, and I ended up having to call him back and apologize, because I said some things that made sense if he was my younger cousin, but it didn't make sense because he was my older cousin. Anyway, it's a whole lot of James in my family. We got, goodness, too many James Lees. We had a whole bunch of James McKinneys as well. So it's a lot of people with the name James in my family. So make sure you write down not only the first names when you're recording the family, write down the first name, middle initial, last name, as much information as you have, so there are no questions and no confusion. Make sure, that's why it's also important to put birth dates, because if you've got a cousin and an uncle with the same name, you want to be able to distinguish them by their birth dates and by birth year if you know it. So all of that information is important. And I know you might be thinking, well, this really isn't biblical, this really isn't spiritual, but guess what? Genealogy is important. Family is important to God. That's why He is our Heavenly Father. That's why we are each other's brothers and sisters in Christ. Family is important to God. So we want to make sure that we also honor our families, because these are the groupings that God placed us into. So we want to honor our families. We want to be able to document that history. We want to be able to have something to pass down to others, especially if we are servants of the Most High God. That should be a part of our legacy. That should be a part of, we are a covenant keeping people. This family served the Lord. We have the stickers up and we have the rugs and everything else that says, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." But does anybody know outside of your house that you serve the Lord? I'm not trying to be facetious here. It's something that should be documented. It's something that should be known, just as in the Old Testament when the Bible talks about, tying the law around your forehead and carrying it with you all the time, and, having it on you. And in the New Testament, the same thing applies, except now it's supposed to be inscribed upon our hearts. So I just want to encourage you to make sure that you not only list where you're from, talk about the cities that your family has occupied. If they got land down south, talk about that. A lot of us got country roots. Don't be embarrassed because of those country roots. It's because of those country roots that we are where we are now. So don't be embarrassed by the things that, some people didn't talk about once they came north, or once they migrated to different places. They didn't talk about down south anymore. But that's something we want to be able to talk about. There's so much that we have overcome as a people. There's so much that our family has overcome and been able to do and provide, and so on and so forth. So we want to be able to document that for those generations to come. And again, I encourage you to be able to record it while you still can. If you got some folks that you can still ask questions, whether it's your parents, siblings, older cousins, whoever it is, whoever that oldest family member is that's still alive, ask them questions, pull them to the side, take them to lunch, give them coffee or whatever they drink, get them their favorite drink, and sit down and ask them some questions to be able to document what you need to know. Amen. Your country roots are Kellyville. Look, I'll tell mine. My country roots are in a little place outside of Tallahassee, Florida called Capitola. I ain't embarrassed. Little town called Capitola, Florida. That's where my country roots are. And that's where I learned what the saying means, Lord willing and the creek don't rise. If you ain't never seen the creek rise down south, you don't understand what that means. And that's, I won't get into all of that, but that's a whole mess. That's all I got to say about that. So some of you know what I'm talking about, and some of you can appreciate what I'm saying this evening as far as the practical application of being able to document cities, villages, names, dates, and also the things that your family has accomplished. It's important to God, which is why he gave it to us in his written word. And we need to honor that same pattern and routine so that we have it to pass down to our children. All right, that's all I got for you this evening. I hope you will take it up and again, at least get it started. If it's something that you pass on to another family member to be able to complete, that's fine. But get it started. Write down the things that you know. Have somebody else come along and add to it and build it out. It could be a fun family project. It could be something that you pass on to your kids, grandkids, great grandkids, etc. But I encourage you to document it because family is important to God. So that's all I have for you on this evening. I love you, and there's nothing you can do about it. Have a great evening, everyone. Bye-bye.